Hey everyone, my name is Dave Nixon and welcome back to another episode of the Peak and Flow podcast. This podcast is part of the BSFT30 series, and today we're going to be talking about simple, sustainable nutrition. Most of the emphasis on today is actually going to go to simple, and what I'm really referring to here is the Life Athlete Matrix and the different pillars that I have of the Life Athlete Matrix, which is move, mind, mouth, and method. We're really paying attention to mouth nutrition here, and those stages that we witness people go through when it comes to nutrition, I call them simple, sustainable, specific. A lot of the times where people run into problems, and this is where people that yo-yo, this is what they tend to do a fair bit, is they have this sort of all or nothing or binge restrict attitude, and the difficulty is that they'll go from this sort of, it's called under responsibility, but this sort of not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go, thinking I need to make some changes, and so they find someone or something to tell them specifically what to do, and then that works until it doesn't, and then they revert to their default. And so this whole idea behind mapping out the Life Athlete Matrix and the rest of the BOSFit programs is helping people move through these stages. And this is really about going, we aren't able to develop a high level of nutritional education for ourselves if we aren't able to move through the first stage, which is literally simple. Can you make it simple and know it and understand it and build a base from that point? So the beautiful thing about this is that commonly people will struggle with either not knowing where to start. They have found themselves in the past yo-yoing. Now that can sound like a couple of different things where they sort of, once again, binge and restrict. So yo-yo is just simply referring to all or nothing, black and white, binge restrict, right? There is another group though that fit this, and this little avatar, this little group, what they tend to do is they say something along the lines of, I don't eat that bad. I hear it all the time. I don't eat that bad. It's like, oh, describe what you mean by bad, right? The fact that we're even talking about good and bad tells me something, because good and bad, once again, falls under an all or nothing, falls under a black and white. And so one of the challenges is that unless we go out deliberately and learn about nutrition, we're commonly getting our values and education from our parents or from society as a whole. And that can be really challenging because things that are often marketed to you don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. Sometimes they do, of course. What I'm getting at though is that they're usually going to be marketing products. And so one of the key things here when we start to hear this idea of I don't eat that bad, it's like, well, let's just have a look at results and where you're at in life. If the thing with nutrition is that if it's kind of dialed in, then it's really obvious to see, and not just from a weight perspective, from a vitality perspective, from an energy perspective, from a overall health perspective. So there's many facets that go into it. So today's really about going from not knowing where to start and going from the idea of not eating that bad to getting clear on a starting point, having clarity on food choices, and then also making sure that we've got a simple steps to follow to be able to build a base. So there's a couple of key principles with this that it helps us go from this all or nothing to a simple approach. And I'm going to offer you some really simple, and something that's kind of sound all or nothing, but I'm going to offer you a couple of simple principles. And one is there is either food or not food, or food-like products. And the reason why this one's so important is because at some point throughout history, food, just normal whole foods, got given a different name. They were called health foods or superfoods. They're just foods, right? And here's your second principle. Food grew from the ground or had a mum. That's it. The less that something is interacted with, the more it is food. The more that we intervene with it, the less it's food. If we can just look at it this way, it can be really, really, really simple. And so whole foods got the names because it's different to part foods. And a lot of the times things that we buy in boxes that people have to market are part foods. And so what we are really wanting to get clear on is like, are the foods that I'm eating actual whole foods? Did it grow from the ground or did it once have a mum? That is, yes, I know it can sound a bit bleak, but that's true. Another way to think about it is protein moves around, carbohydrates grow on the ground. And then of course there's other, like these is, just remember, this is simple principles for building a simple base of nutrition, rather than getting into the depths of like, well, as a vegan, what should I be doing to be able to get more meat because I'm not going to eat something that had a mum or that once moved around, which is fine. There are, of course, more than ever resources to be able to have a vegan lifestyle, and you can find out more about that in the BSFT30 program, especially if you're asking, and I'll make sure I get experts in that space to be able to answer those questions for you far greater than I can. All I'm doing in offering you these principles is making it very, very simple to understand what a protein is, what a carb is, what a fat will be. Fats are basically oily, so if something's oily, it's a good chance it's probably fat. Well, nuts aren't oily. No, but if you crush them. So anyway, the other thing here that's really important is that you earn what you learn. And so when we palm off our nutritional education and our weight loss results, or whatever the case might be, when we palm that off for someone else to just tell us what to do, we never actually learn, right? We might be really dependent that all the conditions have to be good, and I can't go out to parties, and I can't, put myself in a position where I'll be tempted. All of this stuff here, it's not actually about food, that's actually about the person. So there's more things to deal with here, and in the way that the person frames their thinking around food and their relationship with food than the actual food itself. So just a recap on that, we've got food or food-like products. Food grew from the ground, or it had a mum. Simple. You earn what you learn. And the last one here is start basic and build. Really important, because it's not so much what you get done in these 30 days, it's what you do in these 30 days and how that gives you a platform for the next 12 months. That's what we want to think about. And what's really interesting here is I think in order to build a simple, sustainable approach to nutrition, we actually have to look at all 4 pillars within the Life Athlete Matrix. And the first one to start with is mind. And one of the key things here is being able to remove emotion from the conversation. Now, what I'm not saying in this is don't enjoy food, or too bad if you enjoy food, you can't have that anymore. Everything just has to be taste like that thing at church, the little biscuit or whatever they give you. Sorry, I've been in church for a little while. It's more about removing the emotion from it, rather than, seeing, it's a cupcake, or it's a croissant, or it's, this, really juicy burger, and that. It's just being able to go, what parts of this is food and what parts of this is not food, and being able to remove the emotion from that consideration process. What's really important there is actually learning to give permission and allowing to eat the food that we really enjoy. The foods that we actually go, these are my favorite foods. How do I fit that within my simple nutrition plan? And that's a really important thing, because what we're actually doing there is removing a secondary level of emotion, which is feeling shame around eating those things, or feeling that if I'm not allowed to, then I have to binge it when I get the chance to. All of that sort of stuff. You've got primary emotions and you've got secondary emotions. It's actually removing the secondary emotion. So if I eat something because I enjoy it, there's a primary emotion. If I have a secondary emotion that I feel shameful that I'm enjoying this because I want to have a conscious goal that I'm not working towards, it's establishing that understanding of the secondary emotion. So it's giving permission to be able to fit that in within a nutrition plan, which allows just a nice, healthy relationship with the foods that you actually enjoy. The other part of that is actually starting to understand why you enjoy those foods. Let me tell you a little secret. Not a secret, story. It's a secret story. So I've, for myself, but I'm going to give a story from myself and also a client. I thoroughly enjoy a draft beer. Beer from tap, cold, sitting down, doing nothing, right? And I'm fully aware of the reason why, and it comes from when I was quite young. It sounds bad already. It's not, I promise. It comes from when I was quite young. I would have been about 12 years of age. I lived away from my dad since the age of 8. I would have been about 12, 13 years of age, and he was living in Sydney at the time. I travelled up to Sydney and I was with him. It must have been school holidays. And we had a day out. We went to the IMAX theatre. We went and did a little bit of shopping. There wasn't much shopping done at that stage of my life with my family, but we had some bags of some sort. Anyway, it was sort of mid to late afternoon, and a nice day in summer, and we're walking on one of the streets in Sydney, and we come up to this little corner pub as if just we're going to walk past it like we did a bunch of other pubs. And Dad goes, let's pop in here and have a drink. And this hole in the wall, I remember him calling it a hole in the wall. My first memory of that term. A hole in the wall pub. And anyway, he bought himself a beer and he bought me a lemonade. And we sat out the front of that busy street in Sydney. And he had his beer from tap and I had my lemonade. And we sat down and we're sitting down on like the little circle tables and the chairs, and we're kind of facing out on the street. So we're kind of like shoulder to shoulder. And sitting there and he sits down and I go, well, what are we doing now? And he didn't look me in the eye. He looked dead straight ahead. He grabbed his beer and he goes, just watching the world go by. And I was like, oh. And so this was a core special moment for me, a core memory for me. I learned there that one of the most important things that you can do sometimes is actually nothing. No thing is one of the most important things you can do. And I tied this moment to be able to have a beer with my dad or just sit down and do nothing with my dad. We didn't have to talk. There was no need to fill the silence. We just sat there and watched the world go by. And I still to this day, like at home, I keep my beer glasses in the freezer on a Friday night. I get home and I open a beer and I pour it into my glass and I sit down and that's my day done, right? That's it. And so I'm aware of the emotional connection that I have to that particular thing. And at some point, if I choose that it's time for me to move past that, then I will. At this point, I thoroughly enjoy it and I'm going to keep it. Another example that I have, I remember a client many, many years ago telling me the story, was early days where there was only one McDonald's in town and they had to drive across town to go to it. But her and her mum, and they didn't have an amazing relationship, or rather, they didn't have an amazing connection with their mother. And so, but they did this little thing. They drove across town and would go through the drive-thru. It was early days. Drive-thru was kind of a feature. And they'll get an ice cream, classic McDonald's ice cream. And they go through, they order, and they had to wait a little bit, and they finally got it. And I think they were waiting for something else. And so they kind of finished their ice cream while they were waiting for the other thing, and then they got given the other thing. And as they were about to drive out of the car park, some mum goes, let's get another ice cream. It'll be our little secret. And so this person ended up tying this emotion and this connection with this idea of eating things like an ice cream in secrecy as a connection to the mother. And so it wasn't until this really came online for this person, they started to realize why they would eat things in secret and kind of hide it from people and at what stages they were at. So if they were in a really challenging period where they probably were feeling disconnected or wanting the connection of a maternal love, then they would start to eat in secret. And so I'm really shortening that story, and what I'm offering you there is that your favorite foods, it's worth understanding why they're your favorite foods. And then from there, you've got choice about how you want to use them, rather than just them having a connection that you're not aware of and kind of running your behaviors and decisions. So there's that component when we come to mind. A little bit deep, I know, but very important. And so from there, we also want to look at actual nutritional habits or the approach to nutrition. And once again, it's starting basic and build. Basic and build, not complex and cut. It's always easier to start basic and establish these habits and build on them than it is to overcommit and then have to try and figure out what you're going to cut away. And so I'm going to talk you through 4 ways to do that in a moment, and the 4 steps of that rather. But the other thing is getting clear on what you're actually eating. So what you're actually putting in your mouth, do you know what it is? Is it a food? Is it a not food? Are you consciously choosing to eat this? Is it saying you've just picked up and put in your mouth, not realizing? Have you just gone unconscious again? So it's actually bringing an awareness to what you're putting in your mouth. And then from there, like when we start looking at the movement component to it, is that your nutritional changes will depend on the volume of movement and volume of exercise and your cardiovascular and strength demands, so your metabolism. And so these things are going to shift and change day to day as well. So it's okay. It's just bringing awareness that this adapts and changes. We can get into specifics at a later stage with a later program. This is really, once again, just establishing that this will go up and down. It's bringing awareness more than anything. And the goal, once again, is to have simple habits to make it easy to win. So you set yourself up to win. We're looking for simple habits, and you do simple things to make it easy to win. A simple thing is not buying chocolate. Like, if you don't want to eat it and it's in the house, don't buy it to put it in the house. It's like, well, that's a really easy thing to do, but why am I buying it in the first place? It's like, well, when are you actually shopping, and are you going down those aisles, or are you getting it from the servo after a long day when you're tired because you forgot to fuel up during the day, so you're doing it at night time, now you're walking past the Snickers? Like, what are the actual things that are leading to that? So you need to be able to set yourself up to win, and a lot of this is to actually bring awareness and conscious awareness to the decisions that you're making and why. So I'm going to talk you through really simple 4-step process to start building, and is basic and build, some simple nutritional habits. So these 4 steps, you can actually use the food journal, the diet diary in the back of the BSFT30 program, the playbook, if you wish, or you can use your own, or maybe you're further ahead of this and this is too basic for you, and if so, fantastic. then you move on, right? However, if not, listen up. Number one is track. You have to track. Now, when I say track, I'm not saying track all your macros yet. I'm not saying all that sort of stuff. I'm just simply saying, are you aware of what you're eating? Are you aware of how many coffees? If there's milk in the coffees, are you putting sugars? Are they cappuccinos? Are you aware of the extra sauces that you're putting on? Are you aware of the little snacky things that you have at work that aren't really sort of super aware of it? Anything that goes in that pie hole of yours is simply bringing awareness to it. So you're tracking it, right? Writing it down, bringing awareness. So we're going to call this conscious. The second is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. BLD, right? We've gone track and we've gone BLD. Are you eating consistently? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the very least. Are you having breakfast? Are you having lunch and having dinner? If you're tracking, you should be able to see whether or not you're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if you're not, then we're going to start having breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't care what it is. Doesn't fucking bother me. The key thing is actually carving out a time for you to do that. That's all. It's the time that I want you to make for your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Because if you don't, if you're like, I don't have enough time, it's like, well, I can't tell you what to eat because it's just not going to work. You need to prioritize, this is the time I'm eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or the time I'm putting aside to do so. And so we've gone conscious, now we're going to go consistent, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The next step is clear. Now, I want you to be clear on what you're eating and if there's a protein, carb, and fat in every single meal. We'll change the volumes and the amounts and the portions later, but are you consciously aware? Are you consistent? And are you clear on what's the protein, carb, and fat in the meals that you're actually putting in front of you? Because it's much easier once you've carved out some time for yourself to actually have breakfast, even if it's peanut butter toast, to look at that and go, fuck, there's no protein in this at all. How do I put protein in it? And now we're starting to add those sort of things in there, which kind of comes to the next thing is that once you're consistent, right? Tracking, now you're consistent, and now you're clear, and you've got protein, carb, and fat in every single meal, you start getting aware of like, what are better changes here? So we've gone conscious, consistent, clear, and now we're changing what the protein, carbs, and fats are to make them more whole foods. Simple. That's all it is. So we go conscious, bring awareness to what you're eating. Consistent, are you eating at least 3 times a day? Clear, do you know what a protein, carb, and fat is in every meal? And are you having a protein, carb, and fat in every meal? If not, put a protein, carb, and fat in every meal. And then your next thing is to change to more whole food types. So there should be a list, and if not, I'll make sure there's a list in your playbook for what those sort of foods can be like. But conscious, consistent, clear, change, done. That is how you build a simple approach to nutrition if you don't already have it. If you do, fantastic. It's really about building out sustainability from there for you, and having adaptability is actually the word, flexibility around the volume of food that you're eating, the portions, the timings, and so forth. But that's for another podcast. Team, thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you'd pass it on to someone else that you think would also enjoy this podcast. If you want to find out more about the BSFT30 program, you can learn more in the links below. You can learn more about our programs that we also run, the BSFT 100 and beyond, in the links below as well. But that's me done. I'm out. Until next time, peace and pizza. I'll see you soon.